About a year ago, my mother had a heart attack and ended up, after being diagnosed with a heart attack, spending about 8 hours on a trolley in a corridor in A&E down in the South Coast, and there were 35 other people on trolleys there. And I was then sent letters by people, when I talked about this, who said that their relatives had died in that corridor, waiting to be treated. Now, when she got the treatment, it was fantastic. We have world-class doctors, nurses, surgeons, and so on.
That's exactly what I was saying.
But our A&E units are like war zones, and successive governments going back a long time now have absolutely failed the NHS as a system and a service and the people who work in it. And to try and...
The construction of 1.5 million homes seems to be really capable of turning the whole situation in Britain around, isn't it? But when Piers Morgan sat down opposite the representative of the Labour Party, it became quite obvious that this promise was bursting at the seams. The representative, clearly not ready for such a tense discussion, could barely keep up with his pointed questions. Their vague and uncertain answers only confirmed that this was not a well-thought-out plan, but just an impossible dream disguised as political rhetoric. Morgan did not hesitate and asked a sharp question. If this promise is indeed the cornerstone of the Labour Party's platform, then why does it feel like no one bothered to prepare for this important conversation?
Pretend otherwise.
I didn't pretend otherwise.
All right, and do you think Labour has the answer?
You know, I like Wes. Not just because you're an Arsenal fan, but I do like him.
But look, think about Susan.
No, here's my point. My point is that when I hear these pledges that come out, right? I mean, the last time I appeared with Wes on the BBC, you couldn't even remember the last 6 pledges you'd come out.
I also couldn't get wording. She was on with Nigel Farage, so I was just sort of...
No, it wasn't on here, but I remember you couldn't remember because there were 6 pledges. It was just too many. Now there's another 5. That's 11 pledges this year we've had from the Labour Party. And you keep making pledges, just as the Tory governments did consecutively, about the NHS. I don't want to hear any more pledges or promises. I actually think that we could just wait and see if we feel a tangible improvement, and people will know, and the figures will be what they are. Stop promising us things that you can't deliver. Just make it better.
That's the real problem. Even the most basic details were missing, such as how they were going to comply with zoning laws or deal with local opposition. There was a feeling that the loud promises of the Labour Party in the field of housing construction were more like a theatrical performance than real steps towards change. But it was just a warm-up. Angela Rayner had to face an even more demanding and critical audience, the British public, whose questions she would not be able to avoid. The tension was growing by the minute. If Piers Morgan's interrogation was harsh, then Angela Rayner's meeting with the people turned into a real test of strength. One of the men stepped forward, full of frustration and anger, asking cold, sharp questions that seemed to pierce the air. His accusation was merciless. She couldn't do her job. He pointed out the obvious flaws in the Labour Party's housing agreement, saying that these were just empty words not backed up by real actions. The crowd held their breath, eagerly waiting for her to respond to this tough challenge.
And I was reading the other day, just on this same theme. Britain hasn't built a reservoir since 1992, despite a growth in population of 10 million people. Each mile of high-speed 2 is costing 4 times as much as high-speed rail in Italy, and 8 times more than high-speed rail in France. And so far, ours doesn't even exist. And the planning documentation for the Lower Thames crossing comes to 300,000 pages, and the project has so far cost £300 million. No building work has taken place. Norway spent less than half that amount on actually building and opening the world's longest road tunnel.
But Rayner couldn't do it. She hesitated, her usual harsh remarks disappearing as if they had never existed. The man persisted, insistently pointing out the repeated promises of the Labour Party in recent years and the glaring lack of changes on the ground. He demanded to understand why, despite all the talk about solving the housing crisis, people are still desperately looking for affordable housing. These were not just his words, they reflected the growing discontent and anger of ordinary people who were tired of empty promises. Rayner's silence sounded louder than any of her words, as if she herself was aware of the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just one question she couldn't answer. It was the heavy weight of every broken promise made by the Labour Party that weighed on her shoulders and made her heart beat faster with the realization of reality.
So do you think? Do you think the government is right? I mean, Michael Conway is your.
Well, I agree with what
is an assault on our green and pleasant land?
Well, I don't think it's that. Although you've got to be careful. Look, 91.7% of Britain is undeveloped. Let's get it in context. I don't think that's the big issue. In principle, I totally buy into what Labour are doing. I've got 3 sons from 31 to to 24, and it's incredibly expensive for any young people now to get on the housing.
All right, let me bring Chris.
So I hope they're right. I just don't think they can deliver it.
This moment wasn't just awkward, it became a real turning point. The public, which had always been skeptical, now began to openly express its discontent, and it was heard everywhere. While the decision to provide housing has not been made, a new, even more disturbing problem has arisen. Who will get the houses that the Labour Party was able to provide? The tension, which had already reached its limit, exploded, and Rayner found herself in the center of this turbulent element. Shocking rumors have emerged that out of every 7 new homes, 5 are being given to migrants. For many, this was the last straw that overwhelmed the cup of patience. These houses, which were supposed to be a salvation for the homeless, now look like political manipulation, deception, and betrayal. But critics pointed to Labour's immigration policy as the root of all the troubles. They argued that by allowing large numbers of migrants to enter the country without a clear housing plan, the Labour Party had created real chaos. In the absence of adequate infrastructure, migrants found themselves prioritizing citizens who were in desperate need of help, and this caused anger and resentment among those who felt left to fend for themselves.
You have committed as a pledge to build 1.5 million new homes during this Parliament. You are also the Housing Secretary, yes, as well as the Deputy Prime Minister.
By the way, 1.5 million homes that anyone who knows anything about construction knows it's impossible. But wait.
Almost every single Labour council in England that the BBC has spoken to says that those housing targets are either impossible to achieve or they're unrealistic, or both.
Unrealistic, impossible to achieve, or both. Listen to the response. Classic Labour.
Are they wrong?
Well, we set out with the National Planning Policy Framework around mandatory targets. They
Brilliant.
were set on a rule which was around affordability, and we believe that they can deliver them.
We believe that they can deliver them. It gets better. Wait.
With local plans. We're working with local councils and mayors to look at how we can deliver the homes that we
but almost every... We've spoken.
Rayner tried to defend her party, but her words just disappeared into thin air, finding no response. People demanded answers, and their anger grew. Why did vulnerable citizens end up on the sidelines? The Labour Party promised to solve the problem of homelessness, but their actions seemed to only exacerbate the suffering. The government's actions in response to this crisis were perceived not just as mistakes, but as recklessness that shocked society. It was not just a political failure. For many, it was a profound moral collapse. And when Rayner finally tried to respond to the growing outrage, her explanations caused even more confusion and discontent. She claimed that there was no shortage of housing, and this made people think, if there really is a lot of housing, then why are they forced to make such huge contributions? In response to their despair, they only heard that all the lines were busy, and they were told that they should call back later, which only increased their sense of hopelessness and abandonment.
Her constituency.
And they have said they are unrealistic and unachievable. So are you going to force their hand?
The entire construction industry, anyone who works in or has worked in construction or housing, planning, anything like that, knows this target is impossible. Councils say it's impossible. The building industry says it's impossible. What's Labour's solution?
To meet those targets?
We are saying that they're mandatory targets and we want mandatory plans. So we're telling them this is what we expect and we'll work with them to deliver it.
Oh my God. It's beyond belief, isn't it?
When Rayner finally addressed the housing issue, her response shocked everyone to the core. She stated that there was plenty of housing. The same man who had proudly promised to build 1.5 million new homes was now claiming that there was no real need for them. These words caused a storm of confusion and anger among the people. If housing is really enough, then why make such ambitious promises that sound like empty talk? Critics instantly noticed this glaring discrepancy. Are the Labour Party really going to solve the housing crisis? Or is this just another political stunt designed to distract attention? The facts did not match, and this was alarming. Experts pointed to the growing gap between demand and supply of affordable housing. Homeless shelters were overcrowded, families were living in temporary housing, and rents were skyrocketing, leaving people in despair and hopelessness. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you later.